I was sitting in a small minimalist cafe in Hangzhou last week, watching a young man at the next table. He looked like your typical high-pressure tech worker. Expensive sneakers, latest smartphone, but he wasn't looking at spreadsheets or stock portfolios. Instead, he was deeply immersed in a temple retreat app, his thumb rhythmically tapping a virtual wooden fish on the screen while a pet companion robot nestled in his lap, emitting a soft, biomimetic heartbeat. There was a strange, almost meditative stillness about him. When I struck up a conversation, asking if he was worried about the latest property market reports, he just smiled and gestured to his robot. The old success was a trap, he said, his voice surprisingly calm. I don't need 100 square meters of concrete to feel secure anymore. I need my neurochemicals in balance. This little guy gives me more micro-order than a mortgage ever did. To a casual observer, it looks like a retreat, a generation simply giving up on the traditional Chinese dream. You might even call it a symptom of economic stagnation or a loss of ambition. But then I looked out the window and saw a sleet of autonomous delivery vehicles silently navigating the street, orchestrated by a 6G mesh that most Western cities can only dream of. That's when the contradiction hit me. We're told that when big-ticket consumption dies, a civilization is in trouble. We see the West struggling with social entropy, fentanyl, urban decay, and a polarized sense of reality whenever the economic gears grind. But here, the emotional substitute economy isn't a sign of collapse. It's a tactical maneuver. It raises a jarring question. How can a society appear to be lying flat while its industrial output, its robotics deployment, and its patent filings are reaching terrifying new heights? Is this a civilization in decline, or have they simply figured out how to maintain a massive heavy metal industrial base while its people find peace in a digital Zen garden? To understand China in 2026, you have to look past the dopamine dressing and see the hard, cold infrastructure that makes this quiet retreat possible. While the West deconstructs itself, China might just be entering a civilizational winter, and they've built a very high-tech fireplace. That opening anecdote, I think it perfectly captures the core paradox we need to get into today.
It really does.
You have this apparent widespread emotional retreat, this focus on psychological balance, but it's happening at the exact same time as this relentless, high-speed, technological, and industrial advancement.
And that juxtaposition is the core of our deep dive. We're looking at what we've started calling the emotional substitute economy.
Right.
And we have to be really clear from the start, we are not looking at this as a symptom of economic weakness or collapse, which, would be the standard Western analysis.
That's the first place your mind goes, right? Oh, people are giving up.
Exactly. But the data, the reality on the ground, it all suggests this is something else. It's a calculated, almost strategic maneuver. It's a really sophisticated psychological adjustment that is only, and I mean only, possible because of an exceptionally robust physical and industrial foundation.
The fireplace.
The very high-tech fireplace.
Right.
We're talking about a system with superior logistics, with automated supply chains, and maybe most importantly, extremely high state capacity.
It's like a total restructuring of what a civilization is even trying to achieve. So our mission today is to really get into the mechanics of that. How does the hard infrastructure, the cold, hard tech, enable this very soft psychological retreat? Let's start with the big picture, this structural shift.
Let's do it.
So when most people look at, say, the contraction in the property market, they just see a slowdown, an economic retraction. Simple as that.
Right. A negative data point, an indicator of decline.
But what we're seeing is that the massive industrial capacity, it isn't just vanishing. It's not just shutting down. It's undergoing a structural transition.
It's a profound shift. I mean, think about the sheer industrial might that was dedicated to that mass real estate expansion.
Yeah.
All the concrete, the steel, the heavy machinery. The entire economy was geared towards it for decades.
An engine of growth that defined an era.
It did. And now that entire engine is being methodically redirected. It's being pointed toward what we're calling high-precision emotional substitute manufacturing.
And this redirection, it's a move toward what you've termed rationalized consumption. Can you unpack that for us?
Sure. It's consumption that's aimed not at external displays of wealth, not at status competition or just accumulating more stuff.
The bigger house, the fancier car.
All of that. Instead, this consumption is aimed at achieving an internal goal. Neurochemical equilibrium. It's about buying things that help you manage your own internal state.
And that kind of consumption, buying a temple retreat app or an AI companion, it's only even possible because of this this dependable physical safety net.
Absolutely. That young man in the cafe you mentioned, he can sit there tapping his virtual wooden fish because he has an implicit rock-solid trust in the system around him.
He's not worried about a power outage.
He's not worried about a power outage. He's not worried if his groceries will be delivered. He trusts that the 6G mesh is coordinating fleets of autonomous vehicles to make that happen, and that all the other public services that they're just working flawlessly.
So that certainty is the bedrock. It's the resilience that makes the whole thing possible. The physical base has to be locked down tight.
It does. This whole transition away from the old material rat race, away from that obsession with property, it's fundamentally enabled by having this high-tech, reliable physical world already built and running at an incredibly high level of efficiency.
It's engineered stability.
It's an engineered stability that then creates the space for psychological experimentation.
So here's the pushback I imagine someone would have. If your economy shifts from building tangible things like houses and roads to building, well, feelings through apps and AI companions, isn't that just a fancy way of hiding a decline in real productive industrial output?
It's a fair question. It's the obvious challenge. But the evidence suggests that the high-precision nature of this new manufacturing requires more technological sophistication, not less.
Oh.
We're not talking about just coding a simple app. The products we're seeing, these AI companions, they represent an entire high-precision manufacturing sector. The physical output hasn't gone away, it's just shifted its focus.
From bulldozers to?
From construction machinery to advanced semiconductor fabrication plants, to the hardware needed for deep learning, to the highly customized sensor arrays you need for an AI to have truly personalized physical interactions. The industrial base is still there. It's just making different, arguably more complex things.
Okay, let's get specific then. Let's really detail the design of these products. Fusozo is the example that keeps coming up.
Fusozo is the perfect case study. It shows this synthesis of bleeding-edge technology with very deep traditional cultural structures. This is not some generic chatbot from the West that's just focused on utility or answering questions.
No, its design is rooted in the Chinese philosophy of the 5 elements, right? Mm-hmm. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth.
Exactly. And those elements, they're not just some marketing gimmick. They're not just decorative labels. They actually correspond to core personality traits that the AI can embody from the very beginning.
So you could choose one that's, say, aligned with fire, and it would be more passionate or creative.
Right. Or water might be more reflective, calm, and adaptive. It gives the user a structured, culturally resonant starting point for the kind of personality they want to interact with.
But that's just the starting point.
That's only the beginning. The real technological leap is in what the AI does over time. It's constantly running, constantly absorbing every single user interaction, every text, every voice note, every measurable emotional data point the user provides. It all goes into the model.
And it uses that massive data set to do what?
To dynamically grow a unique, completely tailored secondary personality.
So it's designed to become a kind of mirror, or maybe more optimized version of the friend the user actually wants.
A hyper-optimized version. It learns you. And it's a physical object, remember?
Right.
It vibrates, it emotes through light and sound, and it fires back these customized responses that are tailored not just to be relevant, but to have the maximum positive psychological impact.
It's engineered for that neurochemical feedback.
Precisely. And this is where the proprietary AI model really comes into play. It's not just doing a simple statistical analysis of the words you use most often. The claim is that the system has this unique, almost, you could call it intuitive, knack for identifying which of your comments really stick.
What do you mean by stick?
The moments, the phrases, the little emotional tells that resonate deeply with your subconscious need for connection or validation or order. The things you say that reveal what you really need from the interaction.
It's like emotional archaeology.
That's a great way to put it. It digs up those resonant, sticking comments. But then comes the really clever part. The second step is knowing exactly when to reintroduce those comments. Weeks, maybe even months later. But it doesn't just parrot them back. It brings them up with a calculated emotional nuance, a slight shift in tone, a new context, a subtle rephrasing, something that makes the callback feel genuinely human, deeply personal, and hits a very specific neurochemical sweet spot.
It's not just data crunching. It's high-tech empathy engineering, all designed to provide that micro-order the man in the cafe was talking about.
Which brings us right to the core psychological objective of this whole economy. This entire evolution. It's a manifestation of civilizational resilience. It's a system designed to allow the population to maintain a high-efficiency psychological defense.
That's a powerful phrase, a psychological defense.
It is. The young worker in your story, he wasn't seeking wealth or status. He was seeking neurochemicals in balance and microorder. The civilization has, in effect, manufactured a suite of tools that allows its citizens to secure their internal state without having to engage in the chaotic, stressful, high-risk world of external pursuits.
The goalposts have completely moved.
Completely. It's no longer about trying to master a messy, unpredictable physical world through material accumulation. The old real estate bubble is the perfect example of that, a high-risk, high-stress game. The focus now is on internal stabilization.
And this drive for internal order, it seems to connect to some really deep philosophical debates about how we understand human behavior. It feels like the engineers behind Fuzozo are, maybe without even realizing it, rejecting some traditional Western ways of thinking.
Oh, they absolutely are. Think about it. For centuries, philosophers and social scientists have struggled with how to explain human actions scientifically. A lot of those traditions rely very heavily on this idea of Verstehen.
Which is what, exactly?
It's the idea of understanding behavior by trying to see the world from the actor's own subjective point of view, trying to get inside their head and understand their motives, their feelings, their intentions.
You explain their actions by appealing to things like sympathy or ambition or compassion.
Exactly. But there's a huge philosophical critique of using these internal motives as your final explanation. They often end up being circular, tautological.
Can you give us an example of how that's a limitation?
Sure, there's a classic one. Imagine a political leader intervenes in some conflict, and the reason given is compassion or sympathy.
Okay.
Well, the immediate problem is, why was that compassion expressed right then, at that moment, against that specific target? Maybe by shutting down a rival's policy, but it wasn't expressed last week when a different problem came up, or when a friendly nation was in trouble.
Right. The word sympathy doesn't actually explain the timing or the target. It just puts a label on the action after the fact.
Precisely. It restates the behavior in emotional terms, but it doesn't give you a causal explanation of the complex network of social, political, or economic connections that made the action happen at that specific time and place.
It leads you on this endless chase for a true motive, which is this non-verifiable subjective feeling. It's not very useful for science or engineering.
It's notoriously unreliable. So if that's the dead end, what's the alternative? How does this new system align better with a more scientific goal?
It shifts the goal.
It shifts the goal entirely. The new goal is to generate useful descriptions of what happens under specified circumstances. We call these warranted assertions.
So the system just bypasses the messy, subjective why, the intentions, the feelings, the motives that you can't really verify and that change all the time.
And it moves straight to the quantifiable, observable what? The Fuzozo companion doesn't try to understand your soul or your true self. It doesn't care. It only wants to reliably predict and then deliver a specific, measurable neurochemical response based on past stimuli.
So Fuzozo is basically delivering a highly sophisticated, customized description of a social connection, one that's designed to create a predictable result.
Yes. It's a mechanism for ensuring microorder in the psychological world, but it's built on a highly scientific, non-subjective technical foundation, which is the complete opposite of a social theory that's trying to understand subjective feelings.
It's the ultimate psychological defense mechanism. The civilization secures its physical world using hard, objective science and engineering.
And then it provides a high-efficiency psychological tool for its people to manage the complex, subjective world of meaning, the world of sign behavior. And they can do it without the constant friction and chaos that comes from relying on unpredictable human motivations or the old material definition of success.
That sets up the transaction perfectly.
It does.
The individual manages their soft, subjective world, but only because the state is flawlessly managing the hard, objective one.
Let's pivot to that foundation then.
Yes, this is the second half of the paradox, because if that foundation, that infrastructure were to crumble, this civilizational winter, this psychological retreat, well, it would instantly become a real life or death survival crisis.
That's the crucial link that so many people miss. The narrative of retreat has to be checked against the visible, empirical reality of the infrastructure on the ground.
And what we see are fleets of autonomous delivery vehicles operating seamlessly. We see them orchestrated by an advanced 6G mesh system that is, frankly, science fiction in many other parts of the world.
And that is hard, physical evidence of effective high-state capacity. It shows the ability to execute incredibly complex, large-scale infrastructural projects that ensure reliability and predictability in daily life.
These are not the signs of a system that's buckling under economic pressure. I mean, we have several concrete examples of this resilient foundation.
We do. In public services and logistics, for instance, we're seeing major public hospitals launching drone delivery programs for prescription drugs and for lab samples.
Right, which sounds cool, but what it really means is the rapid, successful integration of high-tech logistics into the absolute core functions of health and safety.
Right, and it's not just tech. The administrative machinery itself is showing enhanced efficiency. We've seen the successful streamlining of things like exit entry services for business and travel in major cities. This shows that the state's ability to handle complex bureaucracy isn't just intact, it's actually improving.
And financially, the markets seem to back this up. The Shanghai stock market hitting a decade high, driven by what the analysts are calling technology bulls.
And those bulls are not property developers. They're companies focused on robotics, AI, advanced manufacturing, the very things that build and maintain that hard foundation.
But I want to push on this idea of high-state control. If we're talking about centralized planning and industrial policy, the historical precedent is often, well, it's massive inefficiency, isn't it? It leads to waste, to miss market signals. Why are we seeing success here instead of stagnation?
That takes us right to the political economy theory that underpins this whole model.
Yes.
The success is directly tied to this concept of high-state capacity, which we need to define carefully.
It's more than just good government.
Much more. It's the ability of the state to actually execute its policies effectively. It's the sheer physical and administrative muscle to get things done. It's different from good governance, which might just be about having the right procedures on paper. State capacity is about physical reality.
Can you efficiently collect taxes? Can you build the bridge? Can you crucially coordinate massive, high-risk investments across the entire economy?
Precisely. And if a state lacks that capacity, even the best policies in the world will fail. They fail because the state can't physically reach its population, or gather high-quality data, or enforce the rules consistently.
And this is where the East Asian development model from the 20th century gives us the theoretical blueprint for what we're seeing now.
It absolutely does. The foundational insight of that model is how state action can overcome what economists call coordination failures.
Right. Can you explain that concept? How does the state break those deadlocks?
Okay, so think of the classic deadlock. Let's say an economy needs a big car manufacturing industry to move up the value chain, but car manufacturing requires huge amounts of high-quality steel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no private entrepreneur is going to risk billions building a massive modern steel plant if there's no guaranteed local buyer for all that steel. There's no car industry yet.
And conversely, no one is going to build a car factory if they can't get the necessary steel locally and at a competitive price.
Exactly. So short-term market signals, which are all about immediate profit and risk, would keep both of those essential industries from ever getting started, even though having both would be a massive long-term benefit for the whole country.
It's a chicken and egg problem on a national scale.
It is. And this is where high-capacity state action comes in. It breaks the cycle by socializing the risk. The state actively coordinates the massive investments in both sectors at the same time. It essentially guarantees that the supply of steel will have a demand from the car factories, even when it completely defies short-term market logic.
Economists like Stiglitz and Roderick have argued this was the key difference maker, the ability to engineer what they call dynamic comparative advantage.
Yes. You aren't just sticking with what you're already good at. You are actively building the industries you need to be good at in the future.
The case of South Korea's POSCO Steelworks is such a powerful historical example of this, of just defying the conventional wisdom.
It's the defining example. It's the 1960s. South Korea is a poor country, and it decides it needs a world-class integrated steel mill. The World Bank, the voice of global economic orthodoxy, explicitly advised against it.
What was their reasoning?
That it was economically irrational. They said South Korea had no natural advantages. It didn't have the iron ore, it didn't have the coke and coal, it didn't have the existing industrial base. It made no sense on paper.
But the state went ahead anyway.
They ignored the advice, they protected the infant industry, they provided coordinated state financing and technical support, and this is the critical part, They enforced rigid output and quality targets.
So the result was the forced creation of an industry that the free market said should never have existed there.
Not only did it exist, but through this intense state-enforced discipline, P.O. Isoko eventually became one of the most efficient and profitable steel producers in the entire world. It achieved a scale and quality that the original economic model said was impossible.
And that outcome was a direct consequence of high state capacity coordinating investment and socializing that initial risk.
It could not have happened under pure free market conditions. It's impossible.
And that combination you mentioned, that's what makes this different from simple protectionism, which can just lead to lazy, inefficient, state-owned companies.
It's the crucial difference. The success of the model relied on combining that protection, shielding the new industries from being killed in the cradle by foreign competition with rigorous economic discipline.
The state didn't just write blank checks.
Absolutely not. It forced these domestic firms to meet internationally competitive standards for cost and quality within a set period of time. If you failed to meet the targets, you lost your state support. It was a pressure cooker environment, and it prevented the stagnation you often see with state subsidies.
So let's bring this back to 2026. This historical model, it basically compounds the logic of the current strategy we're observing.
It does. It shows that a superior state capacity and dominance over physical assets are the necessary preconditions to build and maintain that massive heavy metal industrial base. The chips, the robotics, the 6G mesh.
And this engineered heavy foundation is what provides the stability for the psychological retreat. The high-tech fireplace needs this enormous centralized industrial power to keep it burning reliably.
The environment becomes predictable. If the state can efficiently coordinate the economy, guarantee reliable power grids, communication networks, and supply chains, then the individual is essentially freed from those worries.
They're given permission to disengage from the high-pressure material world and focus on managing their own emotional reality.
The stability that the emotional substitute economy needs is a direct result of this coordinated high-state capacity.
But here's the question that comes to my mind. If you're this reliant on a centralized state capacity, what's the long-term risk to adaptability? The system sounds incredibly efficient at executing known objectives, like building a steel industry or rolling out 6G. But what happens when a truly unexpected disruption hits? Something nobody planned for.
That's the core tension in the model, absolutely. The system is designed to prioritize stability and execution over the, let's say, the messy and unpredictable creativity that might come from decentralization.
So how does it address that?
The sources suggest that the state addresses it by making innovation itself a coordinated policy objective. Those technology bulls we mentioned, they are heavily subsidized and directed by the state towards frontier technologies. AI, biomanufacturing, new materials.
So the goal is to make sure the industrial base is constantly evolving, not just getting better at things it already does.
Exactly. The idea is that if your state capacity is high enough, you can even centrally plan and deploy industrial adaptation at a very high speed. You can point your entire industrial machine at the next problem on the horizon.
So we've basically established this dual operating system. You have the industrial state handling the hard, predictable physical world, and the individual handling their own soft, subjective, emotional world.
Right. And to really understand how these two very different spheres can coexist so stably, we need a framework to connect them.
And that framework is the transactional view of behavior, which comes from philosophers like John Dewey and Arthur Bentley.
Yes. This view is incredibly helpful for seeing the stability in this new societal arrangement.
So how does this transactional view apply here? It sounds a little like we're just talking about a social contract or a bargain.
It's deeper than a simple bargain. The core idea is that the organism, the person, and their environment are not separate things. They are inseparable parts of a single transaction.
Okay.
So behavior isn't just one thing acting on another. It's this field of mutual reciprocal influences. The organism and environment are constantly shaping each other.
And in this model, the stability comes from the physical state system providing a completely predictable, reliable environment.
And the individual, in turn, stabilizes their own psychological state. That is their primary contribution to the societal transaction.
So the person retreating into their microorder isn't just an isolated act of giving up. It's a necessary, high-efficiency psychological adjustment. It actually reduces social friction and chaos.
And by doing that, it enables the heavy physical system to operate without being disrupted by, social unrest or widespread anxiety. The individual is fulfilling their side of the transaction by achieving internal equilibrium.
And the stability of that entire transaction hangs on the reliability of the hard physical foundation. The 6G mesh, the logistics, the industry.
It all comes back to that. And that foundation stays stable because its processes rely on verifiable, quantifiable information. Information that generates what we call warranted assertions about the physical world.
Let's really clarify warranted assertions.
Yeah.
This seems to be the absolute linchpin of the whole physical system's success.
It is. A warranted assertion is a powerful concept. It's not truth with a capital T, like something you get from a divine revelation. Instead, it's a useful description of what happens under specified circumstances.
And it's achieved through a rigorous scientific process. You constantly check and revise your findings against observable, objective facts.
Exactly. It's a conclusion that is warranted by the evidence you have right now, but it's always open to being improved or overturned by new evidence.
So the 6G mesh system is based purely on warranted assertions. Its function relies on testable, repeatable descriptions of physics and engineering, not on anyone's feelings or motivations.
Right. If the delivery drone fails to fly the correct route, the assertion, the prediction about its behavior was flawed. The code, the hardware, the understanding of aerodynamics, something must be immediately revised based on that new data.
And that's what makes it so different from trying to explain things with subjective motives. That leads to circular reasoning, but the science behind logistics and engineering has to produce reliable descriptions if you want to predict and control things in the real world.
The entire physical system works because the engineers follow this process of inquiry. They start with objective facts, they develop testable hypotheses, they run rigorous tests, and then they modify both their ideas and their understanding of the facts as they learn more.
And the ability to constantly generate these useful descriptions. How gravity affects the drone, how a specific steel alloy hardens, how a 6G signal propagates through a dense city, that is fundamental to civilizational survival. If you lose that ability, the whole stability collapses.
It creates the predictable environment.
Yeah.
And it's only within that highly predictable physical framework that the individual's emotional retreat, their sign behavior or psychological defense can be conducted safely.
That young man in Hangzhou, he doesn't need to know why his AI companion makes him feel calm in some deep philosophical sense.
No, he just needs the warranted assertion that if he interacts with it in specific ways, it will reliably produce the desired neurochemical response, and that the power grid will not fail while he's doing it.
This absolute requirement for predictability in the physical world, it leads us to a fascinating contrast between the technical sphere and the subjective emotional sphere. And we can see this really clearly through the lens of information theory.
Yes. What's so interesting here is how the technical systems that enable this industrial base achieve their incredible efficiency by deliberately and systematically excluding subjective emotional meaning.
This goes back to the foundations of cybernetics and communication systems, the work of Claude Shannon specifically.
Right. Shannon's information theory, which is the mathematical basis for all our digital communication, is strictly quantitative. It's about measuring the capacity of a communication channel.
How many bits per second can you push through it, right?
Essentially, yes. In the technical context of a 6G network, information is a mathematical quantity. It relates to the rarity or unpredictability of a signal sequence, and it's measured in bits. The entire goal of the engineering is to minimize redundancy and maximize the efficient, error-free transmission of a sequence of symbols.
So when the 6G mesh is transmitting data for an autonomous vehicle's collision avoidance system, the tech is only concerned with the speed and accuracy of that signal sequence, the ones and zeros.
Exactly. The actual meaning of the message is completely irrelevant to the engineering of the communication channel itself.
It doesn't matter what the bits represent.
Not to the channel. Technical information theory, at its core, officially and explicitly disavows any concern with semantic meaning. That is, what is actually being conveyed by the signal sequence. Whether the signal says, "drone delivery confirmed," or contains a line of poetry, has zero bearing on the mathematical calculation of the network's efficiency.
And this reinforces the whole idea of the high-tech fireplace. The infrastructure is so successful precisely because it sticks to hard, quantified science that completely disregards subjective emotional meaning.
It has to. It achieves control, efficiency, and reliable prediction of physical processes by ruthlessly avoiding the subjective messiness of human communication and meaning.
It creates this perfectly quantified, non-subjective technical layer that guarantees stability.
By focusing only on those hard, quantified descriptions, those warranted assertions, the industrial system achieves physical mastery. And this then leaves the management of the necessarily subjective, messy, hard to quantify human realm of meaning and emotional balance to the individual.
Who manages it with their own highly personalized, high-precision mechanisms? The emotional substitute economy.
It's a beautifully divided system of inquiry in a way. Hard science focuses on what happens in the physical world. The new soft technology focuses on stabilizing how you feel about it.
But the hierarchy is clear. If the physical system collapses, the feeling management system is useless.
It is, but the reverse is also a risk. If the feeling management system fails for too many people, the resulting social friction could potentially destabilize the hard system.
But the physical stability is absolutely paramount. The whole system confirms the strategy. Your physical layer must be built on procedures that ruthlessly prioritize warranted assertions over emotional comfort or subjective beliefs.
The young man in the cafe can retreat into his digital Zen garden because the system has guaranteed, using objective science, that the rest of his world is utterly predictable and functioning at peak performance.
So if we pull all these threads together, what we're really seeing is a deliberate strategic coherence.
Absolutely. The perceived societal retreat, this lying flat phenomenon, the search for microorder, it isn't a sign of civilizational weakness or decay. It's a highly sophisticated psychological adjustment.
And it's one that is built upon and is only made possible by an exceptionally high degree of physical and industrial state control and capacity.
The emotional substitutes themselves, the AI companions, the apps that provide this neurochemical balance, they are the high-precision output of the very same technological system that people appear to be escaping from.
So it's a tactical choice. It's a decision to leverage this immense technological power to solve the problem of human happiness and stability internally.
Right, rather than through endless external conquest or zero-sum material competition.
And that really is the key takeaway for understanding the resilience of this model. It lies in the successful management of the absolute core components of civilizational survival.
Infrastructure, advanced logistics, social predictability. By achieving dominance in that hard physical sphere through superior state capacity and coordinated industrial policy, the population is then granted you could almost call it a luxury, to shift its focus entirely.
They get to shift their entire existential quest away from that old, volatile search for material certainty, the square meters of concrete, the status symbols,
and towards a new, much more accessible equilibrium, guaranteed neurochemical balance, an equilibrium that is achieved through highly personalized, high-tech emotional systems.
It's a redefinition of security, and it's a form of security that can be efficiently manufactured and delivered.
And ultimately, the greatest value of this entire system, both the hard infrastructure and the soft psychological tools, doesn't lie in the subjective meaning that a user gets from their AI companion. The true value lies in the system's underlying ability to produce constantly revised, useful descriptions of what happens.
The warranted assertions.
Those warranted assertions about the hard physical world, that objective, verifiable knowledge of physical reality, that proves to be the most fundamental component for the continuation and the resilience of the entire civilization.